when you're at this stage of our career, you're just cheering each other on because like you've been through so much together. You've been through so many challenges and you're on this other side.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. Look, another great episode. It's been quite a flurry of wonderful guests. Well, really the whole three and a half years of the podcast. And Jeff from Frankenstein is absolutely no different in that regard. So Jeff has been the keyboard player with the Newsboys, iconic Christian rock band, and just iconic band really outside of that genre as well. And as you'll hear, Jeff's introduction to that band is alone worth the price of admission, but he has some amazing insights on working that long and lots of, for those that love a good rig tour, we definitely get into some of the depth around the rig, which is always cool to do as well. So yeah, hope you enjoy this a lot, and I'll talk to you after the show. Jeff, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, sir, and thanks for joining us from Nashville on a Friday night. It's no mean sacrifice.
No problem. In fact, we have a 4-week-old baby at home, so this is actually quite relaxing. Yeah.
Yes. Without getting too deep into details, is that your first child? Because that's even more traumatic if it's your first child.
Yeah, this is our 5th. We have 4 girls,
okay.
And we've got a boy for the 5th one. So
yeah,
it's fun.
You're an old hand then. Yeah, that's great. So now, look, it's lovely to have you here. I thought we'd kick off with our more traditional question about, Jeff, your musical upbringing. So what got you into music in the first place and led you to developing a passion for it?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I was an adopted kid. And so the family that adopted me, or my mom was actually a musician, and she was the church music director. And so probably a similar story to a lot of keyboard players. I was forced into mandatory service at the church, and our church was kind of like, it was very like gospel Pentecostal oriented. So we would have like these, 3-hour services, and about half of that would be music based. And so I was the kid who was like in the band. So like thrown into it with a bunch of musicians from, some were great, some were amazing, some not so great. And it was one of those kind of churches where you were just thrown into the fire. The pastor could call an audible at any given moment, any song in any key at any time. And it was a great learning environment. I did take lessons for a while. I didn't find that to be that rewarding. I think I was always more interested in just venturing out on things I wanted to create instead of playing other people's music when I was younger. And then when I hit like high school and college, I really started to take on, really got interested in music. And Detroit was just a wonderful city to grow up in as far as music is concerned, because you had everything from like soul music and Motown, which is such a big heritage, a big part of that. And that really, I was fascinated by that. Also, as a keyboard player, it's also one of the, alleged birthplaces of techno music and programming. And so that captivated me as well, how like one person and synthesizers could create all this stuff. And at that time, you have to think about the year. So I was born in 1974. So my high school years would have been, from like 88 to 92, which was a really, incredible leaps and bounds in the synth world and all that. So I was really intrigued by all that. Couldn't afford a lot of the gear back then. It was so like pricey and crazy. There were no laptops. There were no computers, like all the things that we enjoy that make our lives so much easier now. So, but yeah, that was my upbringing. And it's funny. I'll just go into the story of how I actually even joined the band while we're here, because it's kind of interesting. I was a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine at the church where I played, he decided that he was going to bring in a band called Newsboys into town, and that he was going to host them in a local high school gym. And he was going to promote this concert. So he knew that my mom had just bought a brand new minivan. And so I got deployed to be the runner for the show. And that's actually how I met the band. I drove the band from the hotel to the venue back and forth throughout the day and did errands for them. And so little did I know, my friends behind my back were like spouting out to the band about, oh, Jeff plays keyboards, blah, 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 this and that. And they were playing me up behind the scenes. And and it was a great experience. I got to see the backstage of what a concert is like for the first time as a kid and all that stuff. And so I didn't think much of it. The band came, went, did the show. And about 3 months later, I got a cold call to my house from the lead singer of Newsboys, who was Peter Furler at the time, Australian. And he called my house. I was at a college class. My mom answered. So I get home from a night class in college, and my mom says, yeah, the lead singer of Newsboys called the house. And I was like, what? And so I get the phone number. I call back. The band was living in Nashville at the time. Sure enough, it was Peter. And he was like, well, we need a keyboard player. And when you were driving us around, your friends were saying that you were this or that. Would you be interested in auditioning? And I was just like blown away. I was like, this is crazy. And I said, well, yeah, sure, I'd love to. Turns out the band was playing not too far from where I lived that next weekend. So, typical Aussie style. Peter was like, all right, well, we'll just see you next week. Just show up. And so he gave me a list of songs to learn. And so I stayed home for like a week. And I learned all the songs in my parents' basement, had it all written out on like 3x5 cards. And I drove in my car like 3 hours out to West Michigan. And I just showed up, and they're like, here, get to work. So back then we had no crew. We had nobody. And we get to the part of the day to sound check, and they're like, yeah, set up all your stuff on stage, and we'll just run through our whole show, and you just play along, and our manager will listen to you from the front of house. So here I am, like 19 years old. And we ran through the whole set during sound check, and the manager comes up to me after all that, and he says, well, that was really great. Why don't you just play the show tonight? So here I am, like 2,000 people coming to this show, and I barely even know the guys, the crew, the band, anyone's names. And I do the entire show with them. And after it, we pack up everything, and they're like, well, the next show's in Indianapolis, so pack your bags and get ready. So I went home that night, 19 years old, and I told my parents I was going to be dropping out of college the next day. And I hopped in my car and moved to Nashville, and we did like 280 cities that first year in 1994. And obviously that was like 31 years ago now.
That's one of the most amazing audition stories I've heard, Jeff. That's incredible. And just, you said, I think it was around 280 shows in 1994. To go from college and playing some keyboards to doing that, what was the psychological adjustments you had to make there?
It was crazy. There was so much going on all at once. I had never lived on my own before, let alone lived in a tour bus. And typical Aussie style, the guys were very motivated, very passionate. They had just abandoned everything in Australia and moved to the United States. So I had never seen a group of guys that worked harder. And I was just like shocked by all that, because they didn't want to go back to, not that they didn't love their home country, but they didn't want to sacrifice all this and have it mean nothing. Yeah, and so I was replacing a keyboard player who had left. He couldn't handle it anymore. He couldn't handle the workload and went back. So I had no idea what I was stepping into. In fact, it was a lot. But at the same time, it was incredibly fun and enjoyable. I mean, I went to Australia in my first 3 months. I went to Europe. I went to almost all 50 states in a year, and I saw the entire country. And where I had come from, most people don't even leave the state in their entire life or travel anywhere. So I didn't know that I was going to love traveling so much or any of that. It was all kind of meant to be. And it was tough being away from like your entire home base and everything. The other thing that was difficult about it was that, like I said earlier, as far as gear was concerned, I was really limited in what I could afford. And the band was like halfway through making a record when I joined. And so I got thrown into a studio full of MIDI outboard gear back in the 90s that I had never seen before. I'd only seen it all in magazines. And so so our lead singer and the writing process and they wanted me to be heavily involved in programming all this gear. And so it was like fake it till you make it, right? I was just saying, oh yeah, I know about this or I know about that. And I remember like, some of the band guys or singers would go home at night, and I would some of the interns that were there, they were students at Belmont, and I would ask them, please, can you spend an hour and teach me how this Roland sampler works or how this piece of gear works? So it was an incredible learning experience, life lessons and gear lessons and the whole thing, all at the same time.
Absolutely. And just, I have to ask, when you turned up to that audition that turned into your first gig that night, what keyboards were you bringing with you there?
Yeah. So the funny story with that is that entire summer before that audition, I worked 3 jobs so that I could buy a Korg O1W Pro.
Nice.
So that's what I carried with me. And the hilarious thing about that was that that was what the previous keyboard players were using, and Peter, our lead singer, was using and loves. And so I had no idea. So I had like all the sounds that I needed for the show were kind of already in there. Because if you listen to the record called Not Ashamed, it basically is like a demo for the O1W because it was such a groundbreaking synth at that time.
What?
It was like a true workstation that could do everything. So lucky for me, I knew my way around that thing like the back of my hand. I like that screen at that time was huge. It was amazing. And so that I was we played those throughout the 90s, and that was the keyboard to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously over the years since 1994, the Newsboys sound has evolved tremendously. I mean, we'll talk about what you've released in the past year. How have you needed to evolve both your playing and what you're backlining or bringing with you to keep up with that diversity of now what's an enormous discography?
Yeah. Well, back in the 90s when I started, it was like we were almost more of like a kind of loop-based alternative band, almost like Jesus Jones or something like that. So technically, it was a lot of programming, a lot of synths, but tons of outboard gear. And so I was taking, not only did I have like the O&W, but like, the B3 sound was in everything we did back in the 90s. So I was taking Leslie cabinets and a Hammond XB2 and then a big old rack full of like a Roland S760 sampler. And you just pray to God that everything would work, through the show. It was so different. My rig looks a lot different these days than it did back then. Now it's like typical MainStage on a laptop, and that's kind of going with me everywhere, controllers. And then, so yeah, it's changed a lot, but my formula for how I set things up and my workflows, it's pretty much stayed the same the whole time. A lot of patch changes in our songs, and that's always been a thing. But yeah, that part has kind of stayed the same.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. And yeah, we'll probably dig into, actually, let's do it now. So you run a MainStage rig now. What was the time point where you sort of moved from more, the rack mounts and the keyboards to running more of a software based rig? What was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back that you felt I need to move to this sort of setup?
Man, when MainStage came out, I was a very early adopter of that. Like as soon as I could figure out a way to make it work, I was on it. So I had, Mo2 interface and all that, and just the flexibility of what it could do compared to what I had before was just so mind blowing. Like changing the order of your sounds, it was everything, and the ability to really get into, because I'm the tracks guy in the band as well,
Yeah.
and so building a rig that like where my tracks rig could change patches for, so easily, networking between computers or changing our guitar player's rig. Not that you couldn't do that stuff before, but like all of a sudden it just blew my mind. I remember when our guitarist saw MainStage, he was so blown away by it that he built himself a MainStage based guitar rig, like in the early versions with just like the stock guitar plug-in and so all that. So that was, I don't remember exactly what year that was, but I figured, man, as soon as I could jump, I made the jump, because you could just basically take the same sound you used on the record and just take it with you. We had never been able to do that previously.
No, exactly. When you say about the running of the tracks, you're not using MainStage to run the tracks. You're just more interfacing between MainStage and whatever you use to run them.
Yeah. So people are always surprised by this, but we use Logic for tracks.
Yeah. Okay.
And only because I know it really well. It's what I've used for most of my life. I mean, I was an old Atari Cubase guy in the very beginning. In fact, if you listen to like Not Ashamed record, Going Public, some of those 90s records, those were all done Cubase on the Atari with that one MIDI output on the Atari, which was just so incredibly rock solid. So we rolled with that for a long time. And then kind of around the time when Apple acquired Logic was when I jumped over to Logic and kind of just stayed with it. And I've been happy with that. I've been really happy with it as a tracks rig, to be honest with you. I've not had any real stability issues with that. A lot of times people are surprised when I tell them, they're like, well, why don't you run Ableton? And, nothing against Ableton at all. I just opened it one day and I looked at it and I was like, nope. And I closed it. And that was about it. I guess I need
very
someone to
different
show me my
interface.
way around it a little bit more. But yeah, we've been Logic. I use an iConnectivity PA12. And so I've got two just really small MacBook Airs just to my right. And then I've got another dedicated laptop to MainStage as well. And that seems to be great. Typically, I know I could probably run everything on one computer, but I just like having different points of failure that I don't have, when I'm responsible for so much on stage.
That's right.
Let's make it as simple as possible. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's use your latest album, Worldwide Revival Part 1, as an example. Talk us through, the writing process and from the keyboard viewpoint, what your involvement was there, and then how you prepare that stuff for tour. And I'm assuming, and please correct me on this, that because of how good tracks and stems and everything is now, that you're essentially able to lift what you're doing from the recording and basically bring it out. But just tell us about the process from writing on the album, recording, and then getting it ready for tour.
Yeah, well, recording, it's different now than it used to be. Like in the earlier incarnations of making albums, we would spend all that time at a studio in Nashville. We'd all be together the whole time until the thing was done. So it was consuming, like every day that we weren't on tour, we would be in a studio like 9 to 5 or whatever our schedule would be. Whereas now it's kind of like probably similar story to a lot of people you interview, but it's bits and pieces, from here and there. We're working from home. I can program from home. Everyone's contributing and all that. So you kind of have your producer who is the collecting everything and putting that all together. And that's kind of how life is now, which kind of works good when you have a family and lots of kids and all that. You're able to kind of balance that home life a little bit easier. Take the kids to school and then come home and write some keyboard parts or arrange something. So I do love that. But yeah, typically my workflow for tracks is once the mix is kind of done, I'll connect with the mix engineers, and I like to get if I can, I like to get all the tracks raw from the recording. So not super compressed. One of my pet peeves, and I don't know how technical you want to get into this, but when I go to a show and, it's a tracks heavy show and, the tracks are blasting through the PA, but they're like already mastered and compressed, and the light's going through a PA, and it's not meant to hit you like that much processing. So if I can, I'll go and get the whatever stem, and I love to play as much as I possibly can. So the basic parts I will play live, and then I get to the point where it's like some arpeggiated part or bleeping or blooping or effects. Those I'll send over to tracks, but our guitar player as well. We don't use any guitar tracks. Keyboards, it's almost impossible because there's going to be some arpeggiated, just the nature of what we do. But so I'll grab all the tracks kind of unprocessed and whatever that entails. And then I'll just add processing myself. And then our front of house guy's been with us for, I want to say almost 20 years, maybe.
Wow.
And he's one of my best friends. So we work together really well and just finding that right balance between everything and what sounds natural as possible. And still, so when you're coming to a show, you get that live energy without just getting hammered by some crazy tracks. And so that's been a great way to do it. And my track string is not that elaborate. Like, I think we run like 5 tracks live, maybe 6. So it's like click, a mono percussion track, a synth bass track for the stuff we can't play. And then I have like a stereo pair of whatever we make the decisions on what we're going to use, it all gets bounced down. And we just kind of hang with it that way. And that's great. I have everything kind of set up on a foot switch. So when I'm playing, I can switch between songs and all that kind of stuff. And it works really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, thank you for the insights on that, because I know our listeners and viewers are always interested. And most of our listeners and viewers, Jeff, are obviously players themselves. And like you, we all understand bands are unique beasts, particularly bands that have had the longevity that Newsboys have. And obviously there are lineup changes. That's inevitable with bands, again, that have been around for, well, I know you've been there 30 years. Newsboys formed, it'd be about 35 years ago, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I'm pretty close to the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So obviously, Michael stepped down recently. Adam stepped up to vocals or whatever. How does the creative process change as you have people come on board or people leave? I'm sure it's fundamentally the same, but just what have you noticed over that 30 years as people come in and out creatively?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. Even though I've been in the same band for 30 years, this will be our fourth lead singer during that time. So yeah, you're right. With every, it starts at the top, right? And then kind of goes down from there. We've always been one of those bands where, we've always given everyone an equal seat at the table, especially when we're on the road, when we're touring. In our bus, we have one bus that has 12 beds. We live with all of our crew, and there's no special privileges for band guys as opposed to crew guys. We're all in it. We're all in there together. There's no suite in the back for the lead singer, nothing like that. And our crew guys, they love that about us. And that's the reason some of our guys, like I was saying, have stuck with us for so long, because it is family, and so that being said, like, I think that's the key to longevity, is being honest with your bandmates, because, and I think that's like half the, like most musicians that, tour full time, like we do, will say, they're like, well, I'm not the greatest. I know that like probably 80% of people that you have interviewed for your podcast are going to be technically better keyboard players than me. I have no doubt about that. But there's so many other factors involved, in being in a band. It's almost like a social experiment. Can you be forced to live within 12 feet of 12 other people for that long and not go crazy? And can you compromise? And so it's almost 50% psychological. But the cool thing is, when I get on the bus and I see my bandmates, like, there's nothing there. Like, I'm so happy to see them. So the process is always, how can we make this better? How can we make this as good as it can be? And I think a lot of times it's pride that stops greatness. Like when you can't admit you're wrong, or your idea wasn't as good, And so Adam, he's been our lead singer. He's been in the band with us now. This is the third year in the band, but we've known it for like almost 20 years. So he was in a band that opened for us in 2007. Yeah. And when we asked him to join the band, like, we already knew exactly, we knew him. He was already our friend. So, and for him himself, he's got experience at the lead singer position because he's been the frontman of bands before. And and we're older guys. We've learned from a lot of our mistakes over the years. And so when you are at that, it's almost like when you're at this stage of our career, you're just cheering each other on, because like, you've been through so much together. You've been through so many challenges, and you're on this other side where now we're older, we're established, we have families and kids. And so it's like, how can we support each other? And not to say we don't have our battles or fights or whatever, but it's always joking and laughing when it's over,
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. You're right. It's 90% about the hang. And I think, you guys have done a brilliant job of picking and choosing really carefully that hang will work. And I'm assuming faith would play a role in that too, Jeff, as far as there's that commonality on top of you touring together and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the cool things I've always felt about being in gospel and Christian music, is that there's another element to it that's bigger than ourselves too. And I know that for me personally, like, when I go out on stage, there's people walking into that venue, and they're walking in from all kinds of different life situations, their family situations, job situations, and they want to just check out of real life for a couple hours. And so for me, like, when I'm working on a set list or designing a show, and thinking about that, and then also the spiritual part of it is like, these people are coming together to be united in their faith, and they want to, it's hard to explain sometimes to people who aren't Christians, but when people of faith come together and sing and worship, there's something that happens there that's super cool and super powerful. If you've ever been in that experience. So yeah, we're really mindful of that. And I think that's a big part of probably why we're still around, because it's not like, hey, look at me, I want to be this or I want to be that. It's like all of us together, the crowd included. And so, yeah, it's cool. Like, after 30 years, a lot of times you have fans coming through the signing line, and it's like 3 generations, yes. Like, where it's the grandma, the parents, and then they're bringing their kid along. They're telling you they saw you in the 90s at some show, and everyone's got a story, which is always cool. And then they've got this kid there, and he's looking at you going, this is my first concert ever. And to which I usually say, well, it's all downhill after tonight, buddy. But like, and I'm like, how cool is that? You like when someone tells you it's their first show, because everybody remembers their first show, no matter how good or bad it was, you know? So I'm like, that kid is going to remember this day forever. Yes. So that's the stuff you're thinking of in the back of your mind when you're putting a show together. Like, all those things, they all play a part in the big picture.
Absolutely. And just when you said about shows going good or bad, I do have to ask you, has there been a time where either just for you personally as a player or the show has gone terribly bad for a technical reason that you can look back and laugh on now?
Well, yeah, there's been hundreds of them, no doubt about it. Man, I remember one of the worst shows that we ever had was right around 2010, 11. It was right when Michael first joined, and he hadn't been in the band. So it was kind of like, we rehearsed with him for a while, and then we went out to do a series of shows, and we were guests of this event called, Acquire the Fire. This was like in 2009 or 2010. And they used to do these big youth arena events. So it was like 13,000 kids, and like they were all teenagers. And we were in Greenville, South Carolina. And it was just a technical nightmare. It was not our equipment. It was not our gear. It was not our event. We were just guests, just complete monitor failure, like complete teleprompter failure for Michael, which was like he was still getting ahead of the lyrics, which trying to get all that, and he had a panic attack, and the band just fell out of sync. And I remember looking out, and there was nothing more stressful than like 13,000 teenagers just staring at you, wondering what's going on. And so the show ended, and I remember thinking, man, this isn't going to work. I was like, is this the end of the band? Like, what is going to happen from here on out? And so I get off stage. Everyone's kind of depressed. I go grab my cell phone, and there was no service in the building, so I'd walk outside. And my wife texted me, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted to let you know I'm pregnant." And I'm like, and I was like, "Oh, not only did I lose my job, but I'm going to be a parent." I was like, "What am I going to do with my life?" Yeah. So, there's no shortage of drama when you're
wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely a top 5 train wreck. That's amazing, Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
It. And just when you mentioned too before about designing the show and the set list, so like a lot of keyboard players, are you finding you play either a de facto or an actual musical director role with the band?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say that I was officially given the title ever, but yeah, it's the one thing that I've learned over the years. It's like when anyone's ever stepped down or there's been a need as arise, they're always like, Jeff, can you do that? And so I just kept saying yes. And so now I'm not only am I the MD, but I'm the LED content guy. And sometimes I'm the set designer or the video director or, camera editor or whatever it might be. Actually, and that's been something I've really enjoyed greatly because the video world is fantastic, especially for designing the show. One thing that's so refreshing about editing video is that unlike editing audio, when you have 128 tracks and your brain's trying to get around that, editing video where there's not as many things in your timeline, it's actually quite refreshing. Yeah. So I've enjoyed that, like all the LED content that you see behind our show that I've put together for every single song. And I've been able to work with other artists too, because my work is like always on display. So I've had other tours see it and be like, oh, so I've been able to do other artists like Jeremy Camp and Katie Nicole, and went on tour with Maverick City and Kirk Franklin a couple of years ago and did content for them and helped with some show design for them. So working with Kirk Franklin was like, full circle, life just going full circle for me, and a bunch of other artists that will, hit me up for things here and there. So it's stuff I like to do. Not that there's a ton of spare time, but if there is, it's I enjoy, getting a little change of pace that way too.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've just mentioned Kirk Franklin, just another artist that you admire. So one question we always ask our guest, Jeff, is to tag another keyboard player. So is there another player out there that you've always admired that you would love to hear more about their story?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I'm not prepared to have a name at the top of my head.
That's okay.
But I actually, Kirk would be one of those guys, because I listen to him play every single night on stage, and that that Kingdom tour I was on was like a 3-hour show, and I was at front of house for every single night of it. And I had never been on a Black gospel tour like that before or seen that. And I remember we did pre-production, and our first show for this just a couple of years ago was in at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and it was sold out. Yeah. And I was on the team that was in the production team and the LED team, and being able to witness a gospel concert like that and be a part of it, like, was unbelievable. And he was an incredible player. Like, just, he's one of those guys where, I'm just going to do this. And then it was just amazing. And, like, some of it was planned, but like that's just not my style. Like, I've got to be way more prepared than that, where I was just like in awe of just, here's a guy who can just go off in any direction and play whatever, or change keys, or actually play black keys, which I don't really play a lot of in our music. It was pretty awesome.
No, that's amazing. And yeah, look, noted Kirk. We had the amazing Jim Daneker on, I'll be 2.5 years ago, and Jim used to play with Michael W. Smith and so on, and he called out Kirk as an inspiration as well. So yeah, definitely noted.
Well, here's a full circle moment. Jim is a good friend of mine. And when he was MDing with Smitty, we did a tour with Michael W. Smith.
Oh, of course.
And so he was a guy I always looked up to. And then I got to tour with him for a few months, and got to watch him play every night, which I absolutely loved. In fact, we got to be good buddies. And so he's developed a ton of MainStage patches.
Yes.
And sells libraries and virtual stuff like that. And so he was that was all in development when we toured together. And so that makes up quite a few of my patches in my stuff that he designed. So it was like a full circle moment. And I would recommend his libraries to anybody. Like, they are just butter in the mix, like the pads. And I know Jim, he is super OCD, and like he does not mess around. So he does great things, and he's been a good friend. I remember not that long ago, I flew back into Nashville, and we had to play a TV show, and I had an Access Virus keyboard that didn't make it on my flight home, and I needed it for the gig. And he's like he has every keyboard ever made at his house in Franklin. I know that it's all there. He's just got keyboards everywhere. And so sure enough, I was like, hey, I call him up, and I was like, bud, my keyboard didn't make it back. Do you happen to have the Access Virus TI, the white one? He's like, oh yeah, I got one of those in the back. He's like, where are you? I'll bring it to you. And so he literally drove from his house and delivered it to where I needed. So dudes like that are awesome. Great guy.
Yeah, no, Jim's a great guy. And as you probably know, he's working on this amazing arcade orchestra concept at the moment, which I'm excited to see what comes out of that. So there you go. Small world, Jeff. Small world. So the other question, actually, before we get on to that, I'm interested in what advice you would give someone in your situation that they're 19 and, going to college and interested in music. What advice would you give to someone trying to enter the industry nowadays, given how radically it's changed?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I noticed, in, not to sound like the grumpy old guy, get off my lawn or anything like that. I think that college students, and I was the same way, that you go into it and you think you have a good idea of what you're going to do, how you're going to fit into it, and how that's all going to work out. And like Jody, our guitar player, has always said, we've always said over the years, like, if you think you know where you're going to be 5 years from now, whatever that thing is, you are completely wrong. And that's been true my entire life. So obviously I dropped out of college to take this gig, and that's incredible in and of itself. But I say, like, what I've noticed this time is, like we talked about earlier, just being a people person is a big thing. Being willing to take on a challenge, even if you fail, just being able to say, yes, I'll do it. And be flexible. Like, that's the big thing. Like, because what you're going to end up doing is probably nothing like what you thought. And I think touring ends up being shocking to people when you realize that most of your life is just like trying to get to a place, let alone play the show. Like, the show is like, that's the fun, easy part. Like everyone's like, oh, what's it like to be on stage? I'm like, to be on stage, that's like easy. That's super fun. Like you do all this work of preparing and all the technical stuff and all the learning of the songs. And all, like that's the hard part, the traveling, the not sleeping, the being away from your family. Those are all the tough parts. The show is the fun part. But I think a lot of people looking at it from the outside, they only see the show part and they have no idea what they're getting into.
That's right. Yeah, very well put, and I love it. And Desert Island Discs, Steph, we've got to go there. What are 5 albums? If you have to nail it down to 5, what would they be?
We were talking about this the other day on the bus, actually, some of our favorites. I love the U2 Octung Baby. Yeah. That's like, when that came out, it just blew my mind. And I think if you look back at some of the Newsboys stuff, you'll definitely see a lot of that influence in there. Sonically, like for the time, it just sounded so different. And I love the concept of a band being willing to just take a left turn on a drop of a dime. Like what a massive gamble they took in those years over and over again. It was almost like became weird if they didn't make a radical left turn between albums or something like that. And then just the production and Daniel Lanois and Eno and all those guys. I mean, how could you not love that? I know that a lot of times like Octung Baby is not the one that comes up from U2, but for me, that's the one that's just like, wow, that's crazy. Let's see, maybe like this one's going to sound funny. Maybe like Hysteria, Def Leppard. That was like, I think now, like looking back, that was like the precursor to what country music is now, almost like production wise, you know, like, and you almost see that trend in Nashville, like the rock metal guys are in country. Like there's so many similarities there, but just the way those couple Mutt Lange, Def Leppard records were produced is like crazy. Let's see, I would have to put a Stevie Wonder record in there somewhere. I'm trying to remember which one, maybe Songs in the Key of Life.
Yep.
I had the privilege of seeing him here in Nashville. I had never seen him before.
Oh, wow.
And he was a big influence on me as a kid. I was just like, wow, growing up in Detroit, my parents had stories talking about Motown music around the dinner table with my parents one day. And I was telling them all the records that I'm into now. Obviously, they listened to them all in the 60s growing up in the city. And my mom one day, I was at dinner and she was like, yeah, I saw Stevie Wonder tons of times. I'm like, you never told me. It was so like, it wasn't even a big deal to her at all. I'm like, how? And she said that Motown Records would send artists to her high school to play dances, to test singles, to see how well they went at, in front of an audience. And so she saw him plenty of times. And then I finally ran into him at a restaurant in LA. He was at the table next to me and I tried to get his autograph and his handler stopped me. I couldn't get anywhere near him, which was a bummer. But then I got to see him a few years back and he played I didn't make it to the end of the show because I had to get home because I had kids and stuff the next day. It was like well after midnight. I think he had played, and it was Greg Fillinganes was the band director.
Wow. And
it was just insane. So I would say that would be one for me.
Great pick.
So you need 5 for real? Oh,
yeah. So you've done 3 great ones, though. You're 2 to
go. Let me think here. Oh man, trying to think. There was a band that influenced a lot of guys in the band, a band called King's X. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
They were on Atlantic Records in the 90s. Probably one of the most, a very influential band on me and a lot of the guys in the band. They were on Atlantic, but just never, they were a 3-piece, had a black lead singer who played a 12-string bass.
Wow.
And had just incredibly soulful melodies, great songs. There's a record called Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. If you've never heard it,
okay,
I would check it out. That was a big one for me. Let's see what else.
Last but not least,
these are desert island discs I need to take with me. So gotta pick. I almost want to go like keyboard player. This is going to be an odd pick. A lot of Australian music is actually I got introduced to because I've joined an Australian band. So and it goes pretty deep. Like I know a lot of Australian artists, but I would say In Excess.
Yeah.
Maybe In Excess Kick would be up there.
Yeah.
pretty highly influential band on Newsboys over the years. I love In Excess.
Great. So there's your 5 picks. And I can only imagine on a tour bus for many, many hours over the years that, you've been, inflicted with everything from the Angels to Midnight Oil to you name it. You've copped
Ice
it all.
House.
Ice House. I love Ice House.
Yeah. Our drummer, every now and then, he'll take over the controls and he'll dig really deep into like the Johnny Farnham.
Yeah.
And all the classics. Yeah. So yeah, I know them all. Actually, great stuff. It's incredible, like how many great artists. Some made it here to the States.
Some didn't. Yeah. Hoodoo Gurus? Have you done Hoodoo Gurus? Yeah.
Yep. They come out every now and then. Yep.
Yeah. There you go. Jeff, our last question is a multi-part one. So we call it our quick fire 10. So 10 short and sharp answers to 10 short questions. So as far as you recall, the first album that really made an impact on you when you heard it?
I'm going to have to go back to, Achtung Baby.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Your most important pre-gig ritual. What do you need to do to feel settled before a show?
I'll always walk out on a stage during the set change and check my whole rig myself. Always have done that. Yeah.
Yep. Good discipline. If you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been?
I would be the video coach for an NHL ice hockey team.
Wow. Okay. There you go. That's amazing. That's another whole episode. A favorite tour you've ever done, if that's possible?
Well, there would be favorites for different reasons.
Yeah.
But most memorable would be our first ever arena tour. Yeah. We went from playing gymnasiums to arenas, opening for a guy named Stephen Curtis Chapman. And that was a big jump. First time we could do a tour and not have to be our own full-time crew.
That alone makes it worth it. Absolutely. Favorite gig you've ever done? That's even harder, I know.
Let's see. Man, well, it's hard not to have a story attached to this
okay.
one. But maybe we'll attach the story.
Yeah.
So back after 9/11, we got invited by the government of Morocco to travel over there and play a festival called a Friendship Festival. And it was, the government apparently at the time was a little concerned about feelings towards that part of the world after 9/11. And so they were trying to promote events of cultural exchange, right? And so we were invited to go as the Christian gospel representatives. And so we shared the stage in the middle of the desert in Marrakesh with all these local artists from Morocco. And it was the only time I have ever seen, while playing, like 300 Moroccan troops with AK-47s loaded in hand in front of the stage. I'll never forget that. And it was really incredible to be able to share our music to those people in like face to face and see their reactions. Many of them had never seen a rock concert in person, maybe never again after that. So they couldn't believe what they were seeing either, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, that's one of the best answers ever. Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. Name a song that you used to love, but you've played it to death.
Good question. So a lot of songs, we did that. We played them to death, and then they've gone away for a long time. And now we're like in this cycle where they're coming back into our set list. Like a lot of these older songs are creeping back. Like we have this part of our show in the middle where we all come down to the front of the stage, and I have a tiny little Arturia controller, like the smallest possible instruments we can find, and I just network it back to my rig, and we'll just rip through a medley of like all the old stuff from the 90s, and fans like freak out. But I don't think I have one,
No, it's fun.
I don't really get sick of songs because I always feel like I might feel like I've played it a lot, but when people show up, like they're different every time. So there are some. I mean, we have played God's Not Dead a lot.
Yeah.
In every possible configuration you could think of. But man, like the fans, if that's what they want to hear, I'm fine to play it.
Yeah, there's always something to find in it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Favorite music documentary or movie?
Let's see. Couple. Fire Festival, the original, that just blew my mind. I loved it. I could relate to it a lot because there's been a lot of festivals we've played over the years that were similar to that. But they actually happened and we played them.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. Let's see. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I'm not a huge movie guy, so I apologize. The Tom Petty documentary.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you mean. I've seen that.
You know the one I'm talking about, where like they had all this incredible footage of them. No, wait. Well, there's that one, and that one was amazing. The other one I'm thinking of was the Rush documentary, where they had been they had like I don't know if it was a grant or something with the CBC, and so they had like all this footage of them. I'm like, how did they have all this? Where they're all sitting around their dining room table talking about how they want to be a musician one day, and it's all like really well, but it's the actual stuff. So that one would be
good
really,
ones.
Yeah, those would be two of my favorites. Because they you really get an insight into the relationships of the band.
That's
guys.
right.
And
that Tom Petty one, Jeff, is that the one where Tom Petty is producing and he's an iconic 60s artist whose name escapes me at the moment, and he's basically ripping the record executive a new sphincter because of the way he's treating his artists. Like there's some,
It's incredible. I'm like, how did they get this on?
It's amazing. Yeah, amazing doco. No, great. And then name one thing you'd like to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player easier.
We need more 76 key keyboard controllers.
Yeah. Yep. That's come up recently a couple of times.
Has it really? I'm glad to hear that, because that 76 key was the perfect size for me. And nobody makes one right now that I can find. If there's anybody out there, send me a message, but I'd love to know about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a theme emerging there. Manufacturers, get on it. Including myself, I'd love one of those, yeah. Favorite non-musical activity or hobby? What keeps you sane outside of music, Jeff?
I am an avid ice hockey fan and player. So I play in three hockey leagues here in Nashville. One of them I play with our stage manager, who was a minor league goalie in Europe. So we're on a team together, and it's fantastic. You get exercise, you get totally out of the music industry. So, you get placed on a team with, 15 other guys that are from all different walks of life, and you'll become best friends with them by the end of your season. They'll do anything for you. And I love ice hockey. It's been a passion of mine since I was a kid.
And how many broken bones and lacerations, I have to ask?
My wife took me to the hospital once to get stitches in my chin.
Okay.
After that, she hasn't been to watch me very often.
Yeah.
Instead of have fun, I leave and I get be careful.
Yeah, that's right. Validly so. Look, that's amazing, Jeff. I can't thank you enough for your time. I mean, you even though you may have, been actively working in music for 30 plus years, it feels like you've got at least another 30 to go, whether you like it or not. It's been an absolute pleasure getting those insights, and we can't thank you enough for it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun.
And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that. What a guy Jeff was. As always, just a guest that was very forthcoming with lots of interesting insights. I can see I would want to hang out on a tour bus with Jeff, and so I can see why he's slotted so well into the Newsboys. It's just amazing. So huge thanks to Jeff for his time, and I'm hoping to see them down under again in the future, given that half the band are from down under. So we'll leave it there. Thank you as always for listening, and a big shout out to our gold and silver supporters, musicplayer.com forums and the Keyboard Corner in particular. Dave Bryce and the team highly recommend it as a great place to hang and talk keyboards. Do jump on that one. From the sunny land of Wales, Mr. Dewey Evans, thank you, sir, for your ongoing support. The lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. We could not do it without you. Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Mike from midnightmastering.com. If you're creating your own music and you need a great engineer for mixing and mastering, then Mike's your guy, midnightmastering.com. Again, thanks to you. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks. And until then, keep on playing.